But some Republicans are concerned that the president's making all the overtures to Democrats and not to Republicans. I'm not quite sure my next guest is among them, but he is here, Kentucky Republican Senator Rand Paul. Senator, your colleague, Chuck Grassley, and many in the House, members of the Freedom Caucus, what have you, are expressing frustration with the president reaching out to Democrats. It seems to their exclusion, or that's what I'm reading. What do you think?
I think diplomacy is always a good idea. I think that what I'm hearing from the president still is a 15% corporate rate. If we can get a 15% corporate rate, boy, you're going to get some enthusiasm from the business community, but also from economists who say, you know what, we'll really get some growth in our country again with a 15% corporate rate. So I'm encouraged. We're still hearing that from the president. We're still hearing the words tax cut from the president, not revenue neutral, not a tax shifting bill, but a tax cut. So I'm still encouraged. The fact that he's talking to Democrats, diplomacy is a good idea. We'll see. The proof's in the pudding, what gets put forward. From my perspective, it needs to be a big tax cut, return the money to its rightful owners, and you'll see growth.
All right. You mentioned revenue neutral, Senator, and the president did discuss that in this gaggle on Air Force One. It's kind of hard to hear. But again, this is the president and his interpretation of what would be a revenue neutral tax cut. Listen to this.
It'll be revenue neutral when you add growth, because we're going to have magnificent growth. If you look at GDP for the last quarter, it was 3%. Everybody was shocked to see that.
All right, it'll be revenue neutral if you add growth. By that, I guess he is saying it include dynamic accounting and the bang for the buck you get cutting taxes. Estimates put just 1% more growth. If we get up to 3%, it's $2.5 trillion extra dollars to federal coffers over the next decade. Are you in that camp that that's how this thing, whatever it ultimately comes out, should be scored?
Well, I'm in the camp that we give too much credence to anybody that makes economic models in Washington.
Yeah.
But if you make an economic model and you're not going to say that changing tax policy affects economic growth, you might as well stick your head back in the sand and go into some other profession. That's the problem here. We're too bound up, and we're constrained by the CBO. We're constrained by the Joint Tax Committee making all these predictions. I think we should do whatever it takes to return the most amount of money to its rightful owners, which means a tax cut, the bigger the better. But as a consequence, we should make government spending smaller to pay for it. And so we'll see what happens, but that's what I'm going to advocate for.
There's some frustration already on the part of those who've heard Speaker Paul Ryan, your colleague in the Senate, Orrin Hatch, saying, it's unrealistic to think corporate tax rate could get down to 15%, probably 20 to 23%. I'm paraphrasing, Senator, but they're already coming out the gate with a higher figure, still substantially below the 35% prevailing corporate rate. But what do you think of that?
There's one thing about negotiating. If you put forward 15 and someone says 25 and you wind up with 20, that might not be so bad. But if we start out at 25 and we have 35, we're going to wind up with 30. So I want the president to hold his guns. I'm out there supporting a 15% rate, and I'll support it as long as I think we can get it, and I'm going to try to get as close to that as we possibly can. We need to compete with the rest of the world. Look, you can move your business to Ireland and pay 12%. You can move throughout Europe and actually pay high teens, low 20s, and we're at 35%. So for America to compete, to have jobs here at home, we have to have tax rates that make us competitive with the world.
If the rich are not included in this tax cut, what do you think of that?
There won't be any tax cut then. The rich pay most of our taxes. And for those who want to make this about class warfare, it isn't about who gets the money, although it should go to those who rightfully and honestly earned it. But if you want to do class warfare on this, the top 1% pay a third of the income tax. The top 10%, which is about $200,000 and above, pay 66% of the income tax. And those who make $75,000 above pay 96% of the income tax. So if you say, we're going to only give tax cuts to the middle class that make less than $75,000 a year, there isn't enough money to stimulate the economy. So
but
really
if that's what you're left with, Senator, is that your way of saying it's a no vote from me?
No, I think what I'm saying is that what I'm going to advocate is for the bigger the better. I want the biggest tax cut we've ever had in our history because I want the biggest economic growth. If you give me less than that, but it's still a tax cut, yes, but I'd rather not start my negotiating position by saying I'm going to take a piece of what that's a tax shifting bill that marginally lowers the rate. I'm going to advocate for what I am for, and that's a big tax cut, and then we'll see where it winds up.
Senator, the president was also talking about DACA and his overtures that have gotten some of your colleagues a little upset to Democrats, getting them on board with a plan that would keep the children of illegal immigrants here. They're not kids anymore, they're in their 20s, most of them. But that it had to be pegged to building that wall. What do you think of that?
The compromise that I've been floating is this. If you normalize or internally immigrate these DACA children that were brought here as children, if you do, count them. We have about 1 million immigrants each year. What I'd do is I'd normalize about 200,000 DACA kids each year for 5 years, but I would count them. So you wouldn't expand immigration. What you do is you would count them in the normal numbers of people we admit each year. So instead of somebody new coming from Mexico City, somebody who already lives here who came from Mexico City would get their spot. That, I think, would be the compromise. You're having some compassion for these kids who mostly know only America, but you're counting them in our total immigration.
Finally, sir, I mean, you've been leading an effort through several administrations now, or at least the last two, for war authorizations, whether in Iraq or elsewhere, Afghanistan, I guess by definition Syria these days. But they keep getting shot down. What do you do now?
You know, our Constitution couldn't be more clear. Our founding fathers couldn't be more clear. The right to declare war or to initiate war is vested in the hands of Congress. This is true. It's incontrovertible. Read the Federalist Papers. It's everywhere. Washington, Jefferson, Adams, they all agreed to it. Madison. And so my colleagues have forgotten this, and some of them think the president can fight unlimited war. I think we should vote on them. It's the most important vote any legislator should take, and I'm going to keep agitating for votes. I got a vote yesterday, and in that vote, they voted against me, but we did actually have some debate over whether we should be at war, and that was a step forward.
What does the president tell you?
You know, I talked to him last week, but we didn't get to that. If I can get him on the golf course again, have a few hours with him, I'm hoping maybe we can discuss a War Powers Act.
All right, Senator Rand Paul, keep me updated on that.
We will make America great again.